We're now joined live by our correspondent Nathan Keane, who is in West Point. He will give us more insight into President Obama's strategy on Afghanistan. Hello, Nathan. The top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, General Stanley McChrystal, asked Washington to send 40,000 more troops, but President Obama has decided to send fewer. Why?
Well, 40,000 was the top estimate that Stanley McChrystal asked for, and generals are in the habit here for asking for a little bit more than they need, but I think he might be relieved because that was just one of several options on the table. There was 40,000, there was 20,000, there was 10,000. They were also just keeping the level as it is, around 63,000. Vice President Joe Biden had argued for a more controlled strategy, focusing on the Afghan-Pakistan border. So in the end, the McChrystal argument largely won out, although he's not getting 40,000. The 30,000 are coming, and they are coming quickly, which will also help his plans.
Well, we know that sending more troops means spending more money. How much will these extra troops cost?
Well, it's an easy sum, $1 million per soldier per year, so that's about $30 billion, but that's just for the fighting units. There'll of course be civilian units as well. This could also stretch out because remember, President Obama outlined that he wanted to start pulling out these troops around about the middle of 2011. If that timetable slips because the Afghan troops are not ready, then it could become a lot more costly, and that could have some real political repercussions here at home. Remember, the domestic agenda is very full of spending items, including healthcare, and remember, we are having record deficits here in the United States, and the budget is definitely over budget.
Yes, you're right. But with the weak economy and high jobless rate at home, many Americans are skeptical about the move. Why is President Obama still sending more troops to Afghanistan?
They are skeptical, and if you look at all the polling, there used to be a majority of people who supported the war in Afghanistan just a year or two ago. That is not the case as the domestic economic crisis gathered pace. People really more about bread and butter issues here at home, jobs, job stability, unemployment, and of course health care as well. But President Obama in his speech really talked about the need to send these troops. It is national security. He talked of planned attacks and attacks here in the United States being foiled. They talked about how that region, Afghanistan and the borders of Pakistan, still are training ground for terrorists, so it's national security and international security, and that they have to send the troops now. But he said we cannot write a blank check. We've got to, in the future, pay for these wars properly, and we cannot afford to fight these wars endlessly. He said America must learn to end wars as well as wage them. So that was really to the domestic audience here who is worried about the cost. There even been calls by Democrats in the Congress to slap on an extra tax on American citizens to pay for the war, about 1%. Now, we could hear more about that in the coming days as they will hold hearings on this new Afghan-Pakistan strategy on Capitol Hill in Congress.
Yeah, that's on domestic side. What about the, overseas? President Obama's European allies are unlikely to send as many troops to Afghanistan as he wants. Could this undermine his strategy?
Well, the diplomacy begins right now. Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State for the U.S., is going to Brussels. So is Richard Holbrooke, the special envoy for Pakistan and Afghanistan, and they will be lobbying hard for NATO. NATO Secretary General has indicated 5,000 more troops, but it's not really up to him to decide. It's the member states of NATO, and I can tell you that President Obama spent 40 minutes on the phone with France's President Nicolas Sarkozy in the last 24 hours, and they have said no. 3,750 troops it remains, with 150 police officers. We know that Gordon Brown of the UK has stumped up another 500 troops to make it up to 10,000, the largest contributor after the United States. But 10,000 extra troops will be a tough call, largely because of the economic crisis, but also because if you think the war is unpopular here, it's even more unpopular in Europe. So we'll have to wait and see. It's a real test of Obama's new diplomacy. He's mended a lot of fences. He's pushed that reset button will it bring him the troops that he needs?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's Nathan King reporting from New York. Ahead of Barack Obama's speech at West Point, residents in Kabul expressed a wide range of opinions.
If the new strategy will be for the benefit of Afghanistan, I will be happy. My opinion is that they should have a good strategy. If so, people will be happy because of their positive opinions and support.
Increasing foreign troops in Afghanistan will not change anything. It will remain the same as usual. It would be better to strengthen the Afghan people, the national army and the police, because every country is rebuilt by its own people.
Barack Obama's policy has attracted a lot of attention from scholars. Some say it goes too far, setting too many targets, and could jeopardize his political position. Lina explains.
Some scholars say Obama is increasing the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan to limit the Taliban's military influence. He wants the Afghan government to be strong enough to take over control of the region so that U.S. troops can withdraw. But they don't think the policy is necessarily wise.
I think the strategy goes precisely in the wrong direction. We are increasing our military presence in Afghanistan, and we should be downsizing, having a much smaller military footprint, and focusing on weakening, disrupting al-Qaeda. We've actually drifted into a war primarily against the Taliban rather than al-Qaeda, and that gets us involved in some very difficult internal politics, both in Afghanistan and across the border in Pakistan. So this is a very bad, very unwise strategy.
Carpenter thinks the policy has raised the public's unease and doubts, and he's also faced with opposition from Congress, including pressure from his own party. If the policy doesn't work soon, Obama will face political risk.
If this strategy does not work, and the president is unable to extricate American troops from Afghanistan over the next 2 or 3 years, he endangers his presidency. He is likely to become the 21st century's version of Lyndon Johnson, who destroyed his presidency by the Vietnam intervention. The American people are already very uneasy. A majority of Americans seem opposed to sending more troops to Afghanistan. So the president politically is on a very short leash. If he can't produce clearly positive results in a short period of time, he will be in very deep political trouble.
Carpenter gave his own suggestions and view on Afghanistan policy.
We literally need to be going in the opposite direction of what he is proposing. A much smaller military footprint, measured in hundreds of military personnel, or at most a couple thousand, not tens of thousands. Working with any influential faction in Afghanistan that's willing to work with us against al-Qaeda, not against the Taliban. That's not our war, but against al-Qaeda to keep that organization off balance. In other words, we need, in some ways, to return to the very small-scale, limited strategy we had when we first went into Afghanistan in 2001, when our target, very simply, was al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden.
Carpenter says the U.S. is incapable of containing the jihad, Taliban, and helping Afghanistan manage its internal affairs at the same time. Therefore, the strategy should be limited to a certain area. Lina, CCTV.
You're watching News Hour on CCTV International. Stay with us for these stories and more. Nuclear tension. Iran says friendly relations with the UN nuclear watchdog are over after criticism of its uranium enrichment plans.